Мистер Бен Ритър. Аплодисменти за Бен Ритър. Мистер Ритър е специален гост във второто събитие след легендата Хари Бенсън. На второто събитие от кампанията Майстори на фотографията, което е организирано от фондация Мусис, фондация Америка за България и Viva.com Art Hall. Мусис всъщност е фондацията, ако някой от вас все още не знае, на артистите Иван Мудов и Гергана Мудова. Вдъхновена е тази фондация от акцията Мистификация на Иван Мудов преди време за музей за съвременно изкуство. Той провокира цялата културна общност в страната, като покани всички на откриването на музей за съвременно изкуство на гарата в Подуяне. И там нямаше никой, освен хората. Но ето, че той продължи да действа и Мусис сега вече за втори път кани световна звезда в България, за да говорим за съвременно изкуство и фотография. Преди да дискутираме по въпросите, които споменахме, ще дам думата на господин Бен Ритър, който ще направи презентация, лекция на тема взаимодействие на фотографията с рекламата и медиите. Заповядайте.
Hi everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Just thanks to everyone for being here, my new friends in Sofia. And if you told me a few months ago that I would have such a special place in my heart for Sofia, Bulgaria, I would say I don't know what you're talking about. But here I am, and this is amazing. So thanks again. What I hope to do is take some of the mystery away from what it takes to actually have a career in photography. I started out with no work and no jobs and no contacts, and I made my way because I looked for it and I wanted it. So I can basically start from the beginning. A lot of people have asked about where I got my start in a lot of the interviews this week. So this is me as a teenager at 15 years old. I was in punk bands in New Jersey. I had long hair. I liked art. I didn't care about school. I was just a pretty normal, weird teenager is what you could basically say. But I was really into art. I wasn't good at painting or drawing. And a teacher politely suggested that I try photography. And that opened up a lot of doors for me artistically, and just for the rest of my life. I use it as a tool to have access or have opportunities. So you can see the black and white side is actually photos I took when I was 15 years old that started to just get me a little attention just from friends, family, parents, teachers, people that maybe weren't noticing any particular potential except for me being a good, clever kid. But it's just being a teenager. And I ultimately ended up pursuing photography in college. So to the other side are my color photos I started taking at a university level. And you're not supposed to have a style yet when you're in college. You're supposed to be taking a lot of photos and discovering what it is that you're attracted to, and maybe getting a good technical grasp on the medium. And also what I learned in college was that it was something I wanted to do every day. I would wake up every day and go to my classes, and then I would work on my own personal time, and I would sit at my computer, and back then it wasn't so digital yet. This was all film, of course, but I would just spend so much time with it that it was clear it was something I could pursue and take seriously. So because the education was so art-driven, I felt like I wasn't going to have a career selling art prints, and I don't. It's not something I do. I have always been more interested in how I can have a job being a photographer. So I figured at the time maybe it would be more of a photojournalism angle, or perhaps I'd be a graphic designer, perhaps I'd be a photo editor. I knew I would be involved in some way. It's hard to be that age and say I will be a photographer, because you have to learn how to make money doing it. It's literally that's a science more than an art. So because in school I wasn't feeling fulfilled with my potential as a working person, I started to pursue internships on my own, and I was able to get college credit for shooting for local newspapers. They needed young people to just go do restaurant reviews, shoot local artists, or cover little news events. It's not mind-blowing work. I'm not sitting here saying, look how amazing I was in college. I wasn't. I was learning how to take assignments. And when digital photography started to become popular around 2002, I invested in my first DSLR camera. I got a Canon 10D, and my parents did help me buy it. And thanks, Mom and Dad. It was a good investment. It wasn't good for art because it didn't have a lot of megapixels back then, but it was perfect for this kind of quick turnaround journalism. It was changing the way things were looking because people were just quickly becoming better at photography. You had more chances to get your image right, and I'm talking a lot about this, but it's relevant because, actually, I'm going to talk about the Phoenix for another minute, because I jump way ahead right here. This was in 2002. I'm shooting for these newspapers in Boston. 10 years later, because of social media, my editor had never left her desk and hired me to shoot Chloe Sevigny, the famous actress in New York City, for the cover of that very newspaper. So it was one of those moments where, I felt like, not that I had made it, but I felt like all that work over those 10 years clearly was paying off, because in Boston, when I was in school, I was admiring the people that were shooting the covers. And then there I was 10 years later in that grown-up career position, getting to do it. Yeah.
Ако имате нужда от превод, забравих да ви кажа, моля да ме извините, има слушалки някъде там. Който иска и който има нужда, ето там е Гати, която ще ви даде слушалките. Благодаря ви, извинявайте.
Should I speak in Bulgarian? I didn't realize this. Everyone's cool? Okay. So in college, I'm going to wrap up that because that is just all precursor to what I'm really up to now, or what I've been up to as a professional in New York. I will say about college, they had put such an emphasis on printing photos in the darkroom and critiques that I wasn't out there shooting a lot. I was missing so many opportunities to be a photographer with a camera and making art. I mean, I have my personal work in this show. Those are accidental photos. Because I was available to be present in that moment and take those photos, they happened. And I've taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of snapshots, and there's only 9 that would be on this wall, but those are really important to me, and I'm going to get to that too. After college, I was still not a professional photographer making a living as a professional independent photographer, but I was career driven, and I was inspired by my work at the Boston Phoenix, and I had moved back to New York City, where I'm that's closer to home for me anyway. And I got a job at a magazine called House and Garden, and I could care less about houses or gardens. I was hired to be an assistant to the creative director of an art department. And this magazine was a very established corporate magazine, and it was in a publishing house, or I say was because it doesn't exist, the magazine has since folded, but it was at Condé Nast Publications, who's responsible for Vogue and GQ and Vanity Fair. So you can see why I wanted to be in that environment. There was potential to move up and have a career as an editor, but there was also access to creative directors who I could annoy constantly and make them look at my ambitious personal work, and maybe they'd give me an opportunity. At House and Garden, I was told upon being hired that you're not being hired to be a photographer. We have the best photographers in the world shooting for us. I said, of course. I just want to learn. And I learned by looking. And what I was seeing was that the people whose work was getting published was much, much better than mine. And when you're in the real world, it's not an academic environment where you have teachers who are basically being paid by you to talk about your work. They're not going to really put you down, or not hard enough anyway. So it's almost too supportive, because in New York, it's either literally your work's good, I'm going to hire you, or get lost. So I started at House and Garden. A lot of these are some of the, I was there for 2 years. These weren't the first things I did. What I learned there was how to shoot products on a white backdrop, because they needed a lot of that. What was going on at the time, this is in 2004, is professionals were still only shooting on film, big slide transparencies, big large format film. And I had this DSLR camera. I had the next one up from the one I had in college at this point, because I kept investing. And the savvier editors said, hey, go shoot this Blender for us. And I would go into the photocopy room, set up a white backdrop, take photos of the Blender, quickly do the retouching, and then they had a publishable, ready-to-go image. And they were completely blown away, because all these editors had been in the industry for 30 years. They are only hiring the top photographers. They're overpaying for services. And here I am undercutting and undermining an entire industry by being available and being savvy enough to say, hey, why don't you let me try it? Just let me try. These products are not from House and Garden. I still shoot products on my own time. We're talking about money now, people. In my own time, in my apartment, Estee Lauder hires me to shoot collections for them all the time. It pays really well, because they need someone who can do it efficiently and who doesn't make a big production out of it. So I can do this work on my own time, which is important, nights, weekends, or a free day, and I can pay my rent with it, and maybe more. It depends on the month. And it's a great secret about being a photographer, that you can do more than what you're showing. You show work on your website and your portfolios to get the kind of work you want to get, but there's so much more work you can do, and that's going to keep coming up. So at House and Garden, it started with a Blender in a closet, and then they started giving me portrait assignments, sending me out, renting studios for me, and then ultimately, I left there and went freelance, and I'll explain why. I talked about my personal work a little, and this is what I would do on my nights and weekends in New York. Up until very recently, some of these photos are. People are fun, and you can have fun with a camera with them. People would like to perform for cameras, and you never know what you're going to get when you're out there. My personal work, though, is important, so just absorb for a second. What I was missing from my portfolio, because at the time now I'm doing this high-end work for House and Garden and this work on my own, but it just doesn't cross over at all. I'd have no identity as a photographer commercially. So I'm either going to get hired to do kind of like lame, boring portrait work, or I'm going to take my pictures for free and show them. So I started to make my own personal portfolio of portrait work that at the time I felt like it could compete with higher end, more established working fashion and portrait photographers in New York. What's fun about this is all these wallpapers in the background I actually would steal from House and Garden, from the prop closet, and make backdrops in my tiny shared apartment in the East Village of New York. But I had, at this point I'd had my camera and I was playing with lighting, and I took some strong images. The one in the top middle, that's actually Keith Richards' daughter, Alexandra Richards. So it's also, when you're in the city environment, you have access to people that might maybe get you a little more attention, or they're just so gorgeous that they're just great to photograph. And it's all about getting attention. So I would post this work at the time to MySpace, and at the time, MySpace was, are people familiar? It's like before Facebook. It was a pretty lame social network, but all these people would start using the photos I would take of them as their main profile pictures. And a friend who was working at MTV actually saw this and said, oh, that looks like what we do at MTV. I'm going to show the photo editor. So she did, and a week later, he called me, and I was hired to shoot Beck when I was 23 25 years old, and this is in 2006. And I'm still at House and Garden magazine. So I used my sick days to go shoot people like Beck and Fergie. And I would take other side work moonlighting as, you know, and I knew how to shoot interiors because of House and Garden. I'd go shoot an interior for someone, but I was making money now. I was getting paid to be a photographer, and even House and Garden was paying me to publish my images. So I'm finding revenue by beyond my salaried position, which, trust me, was like barely anything. But I'm being hired by people, and I'm doing strong work. And the MTV stuff was enough of a kick for me to actually go freelance at that point. So in 2007, I went off on my own, and I've been working for myself ever since. And for 2 years, I did studio portrait work for MTV, anything from a punk rock band to iconic people like Rufus Wainwright's up there, Perry Farrell, you've seen in the show, Fergie, some rappers. That one's Chameleonaire. I'm not sure if he made it out here ever. Also, though, I'm not the strongest studio photographer yet. MTV needed young photographers to shoot for their .com site. This is before YouTube was even really big yet. So it was all about having photo slideshows on the internet. And MTV would basically take advantage of artists coming in and have a young photographer who could work for lower than very standard rates shoot very big celebrities. So I'm just getting this opportunity to have access to people that now PR people are way savvier and probably wouldn't let this happen ever. Because all of a sudden all these images are getting out of their artists because MTV's just, oh yeah, photo shoot, no big deal. And then all of a sudden they're like, Beck for MTV. It was a good, and also having the famous faces in my book, it was a way for me to reach out to people in the industry and get meetings, because people wanted to know who this young person was who was actually getting access to studio lighting and celebrities. I can get more into that if I come back around to it, but this is probably more fun to see all these horrible photos I took of Fergie. The thing is, because I wasn't a strong studio photographer yet, and because I was nervous and didn't want to be basically bossing around a big star like this on my second big celebrity shoot ever, I let her run around like a maniac, posing everywhere, not standing in the right light. And so there's a lesson that I learned about lighting for a set, and maybe making it so that anywhere that someone like Fergie ran around to, the light would hold up. You know, you learn just little lessons every time you shoot. Oh, I should have done this. The good news is I was able to keep a few, and MTV continued to hire me after that. I didn't show them a lot of these, is the truth. Also, there's other kinds of moments that you're going to have that people need you to be a trusted person who is good at shooting famous people and not freaking out or, you know, being nervous and having some command over the situation. But as you can see, this isn't a studio photo shoot with Courtney Love. An editor I knew at a website that did stuff about the beauty industry thought I would be a good person to go cover Courtney doing her test for her makeup for what was going to be her upcoming tour. And you can see me kind of like poking, and I love that picture just because I got to have that's my photo with Courtney Love. There's just more opportunities out there than just shooting the big studio photo. You know, you have to be available. You have to say yes, and it opens doors for you. So you make a few bucks and you get to meet your idol. Stuff like that happens a lot when you're available for it. So, meanwhile, while I'm shooting for MTV, I'm also shooting for Vice magazine, which kind of relates more to my personal work. Here's editorial work I've done for Vice, and if you sort of get in your head the personal work I've done in my life, this is why Vice liked me, because I could do fashion shoots that looked like my crazy, spontaneous personal work. So there was a value to it after all, and it was why I was doing it. It was just a matter of getting their attention. And when not everything is some big story. The truth is I had friends that were interns at Vice when I was working at House and Garden, and now they're the people running the company because it's been 10 years. So my small editorial opportunities turn into covers, but they also turn into ad campaigns. And if you reference my personal work in your head, this ad campaign for a video game called Guitar Hero, they literally said, Ben, we want you to throw 20 different parties with this video game and go shoot people being out of control. I said, of course I'll do that. This was right after I went freelance, actually. So this was my first big campaign opportunity, and they did not pay me nearly enough. They took total advantage of me, but I was out there, I was independent, I was working, and I'm getting a Guitar Hero campaign. And because this was successful, a company like that Vice is, the magazine, is also a creative agency. So now I'm in there as someone who can do campaign work. So this is a tequila brand called Hornitos. This was a national campaign on billboards all over the country because I was the person who had done the other work that Vice was showing as a possible photographer to get the campaign. So now I'm starting to win campaigns because I have the small experience based on the stuff that I cared about and was passionate about anyway. So I was able to start to move away from the house and garden commercial work, the Boston Phoenix commercial work, and actually turn the things I was interested in into what would become my commercial career. And Vice even has used, you see the girl with the red lips in the show, Vice has used that just to promote themselves, like as a calendar. They once used it. And then they have this other image I once took. That's my friend with a seashell, but you can see what it looks like. And Vice was advertising their new Vice.com website. Meanwhile, I'm there, and I'm working for MTV, Vice, anyone else who will give me a little tiny portrait in a magazine. There's a lot of that starts to come up when your name starts to get out there, and when you're reaching out to people. Meanwhile, there was a website called mastheads.com, and it just had every single person who worked at a magazine's name and then the way that their email address would format. So some days I would just sit there and write like 300 emails to people that definitely didn't want to hear from me, and maybe one of them would like have me in for a meeting, but it was worth it because you'd go in and that's how I met the people at Maxim. Because they saw the Vice work and they saw the MTV work and they said, oh, that's like a cool young person. So for me, it's always been about getting in the door and maybe doing something small and then building trust, essentially. At Vice, I've actually ended up being the person that when we go to fly to another exotic location and get crazy cars and do some really big over-the-top shoot, I'm the person they're calling these days because I can deliver, honestly, when you're young, and it's really hard to put the pieces together. And so all that experience leads up to more opportunities, and because you have the experience, you can handle the opportunities. I mean, photography you can be the most talented person with a camera naturally, but if you don't have a lot of set experience, a lot of experience with models, fashion, hair, makeup, it's just impossible to know what you're doing. You're not going to be able to command the situation, and people are really looking at you to make the final call. And there's a lot of calls to be made, and it's just something that grows with you. There's almost like a small checklist when you start out. You're like, camera and film, check. And then it turns into camera, film, and lighting, check. And then it turns into camera, film, hair, makeup, set, location, permits, all these new things. And because you do it so much and because it all kind of naturally builds, it's easy to manage, honestly. You just have to know what it all means. And you can't fake it because it's a picture. So you can't say you did a good job when it's clearly not good. You saw the pictures of Fergie, right? Like, sometimes you have to save the shoot later and edit. This is more Vice, and I'm going to move away from Vice in a moment, but Vice was a very big platform for me, so it's important to talk about. It's also why I'm here today, because the Muses Foundation, who's having me, knows my work from Vice, because the same people are publishing that magazine in this country. So that's, who knows where things are going to take you. So Vice brand is growing and getting more people working with their creative agency. And so they have now they're starting to get beauty brands. This is Garnier, the shampoo company. So I'm the only person that they work with closely that they can call. And I'm gonna quickly gloss over Maxim because I talked about them. And you see how all of my experience can sort of play together for a glossy magazine. It's the action, it's maybe the celebrities. You got the Bear Grylls shot in this show. You have people with like being hip and cool, lots of bright light. So I've had a successful relationship with them. It's just one magazine that I've had a lot of fun with, and when you're working at a certain level, these opportunities open up, and you get to really just have fun at work some days, which is great. But meanwhile, while I'm doing all this hard work and really establishing that my personal style, I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes work for cosmetics companies. Behind the scenes work means you are not the important photographer. There's either going to be a very famous photographer shooting that day, or it's going to be a video shoot. And these brands would have me back there because they basically need content to put on their social media. And that's like a really new thing now. So brands hire tons of very, very, very talented photographers who have established themselves, but maybe aren't at the top tier yet. So my work with Bobbi Brown, in particular, has been a special relationship because she is part of the company. Bobbi herself, that's her with her name under her, and that's a photo that I took of her on one of my first jobs, and they still use it on like walls in stores to this day. So they started taking note of the work I'm doing as a behind-the-scenes photographer, and they started that brand in particular started putting up a lot of value on this work. So this is a recent launch the brand had with the very famous model Kate Upton. I'm not sure if she's as famous over here. This is actually a campaign shot for the brand now, even though I was behind the scenes on a video shoot. So there's value in a lot of types of photography, and it's just a matter of actually committing to being a part of a brand or working with people closely. It's not just getting hired to do something different every time. This is growing relationships like any job. You start at one spot and you hope to get promoted, and that is maybe something I've sort of invented in a way, like starting in the mailroom as a photographer and working your way up. But it worked for me. I mean, there's the other way to do it, honestly, is if you live in New York, you assist a big person for 10 years if you can get the gig, and you don't shoot a thing for 10 years, and then you become a carbon copy of them. So my 10 years, I think, have been better well spent because I'm establishing my own client base, my own contacts, my own career, and the times are changing. So I think a lot of the people doing it the other way, maybe some of them will have great success, but a lot will wonder why they're not getting hired just because they assisted so-and-so. And maybe it's because I'm there already doing the work with the creative directors and the art directors. So I'm behind the scenes at Bobbi Brown, and this work doesn't make me particularly happy, but it does make me particularly paid, so I'm happy to be there. It's the right people, I'm saying. Like, you gotta, if you're making the right people happy, it's going to go somewhere. Meanwhile, there's something photographers do called test shoots. It's basically just doing shoots to build your portfolio, and it's important to work with stylists and makeup artists, and because you all end up working together out in the industry. So if you kind of field teams of people that you particularly like working with, you can actually pitch shoots to magazines together, or or if you get if you get a campaign, you can say, yes, I have a makeup artist and a stylist. It's the people you trust and that you like to work with. And they're going to have a style too. So you can suggest them to, like, if you know a lot of people, you work with a lot of people, you can suggest them to different clients based on the looks of the shoot that you're going for. I don't like doing test shoots because it's for free and it takes a lot of time. And then the best you can do with the work is put it on the internet. And that's great, and you should be doing that. So I'll get to that in a minute. But there was this small beauty website in the States called Refinery 29, beauty and fashion and lifestyle. And one of my friends, now this is recent. This is the last 3 years now. So my friends are starting to also grow with me. It's not me on my own anymore. We're all in our 30s, and they're becoming the photo editors and the bosses and the art directors finally. So, and I'm in my established position. So you really do feel the community grow around you when you're doing the work a lot, because it becomes your friendships and your closest relationships. So this photo editor and I said, hey, let's start doing high-end beauty shoots for the web. No, all these websites were just kind of posting stock imagery. So we started doing these shoots in my apartment for this website. And then meanwhile, this maybe it was a little lucky. Maybe it was obvious to all of us that this website was doing really well, and they became hugely visible, and especially to creative directors and editors that I coveted and I wanted to work for. So here's a lot of the work I've done. Take note of the top right image, because I posted that one after the shoot to Instagram. And the creative director from Bobby Brown, who I work with all the time behind the scenes, was looking at my Instagram and said, "Hey, Ritter, why don't you shoot like that for us?" And I said, "Why don't you give me a shoot?" Boom. So what I did was, after essentially 7 years of doing small portrait projects or behind the scenes work with this brand in particular, I'm now shooting their campaigns. I have the whole season this season. And I have their eyewear line, and I have their new book. And it's because I was doing all of this other work that I had learned how to do by being present in other situations. I learned how to light for beauty shoots, not by assisting a big person for 10 years, but by being behind the scenes on Bobby Brown shoots for 10 years, watching other people do it. I never had to pick up someone else's phone once, and I was getting paid well doing my own work, and meanwhile learning everything. It was like a free ticket to the show. So this has really influenced my work. We're moving along quick, people, I promise. This has really influenced my work going forward, because it has a... Oh, and I showed you the Garnier thing advice before. Because I'm doing this, whatever. You get it. The work I'm doing now, I feel like I have a future with it. I can keep doing this work, and I can grow with this work. The beauty in the portrait work, it takes a certain sophistication and an experience level, so it's something I can bring to the table that maybe a lot of people can't, and therefore I have something to market. And it's been attracting more and more clients in that way. So I just did this project for Adidas like right before I came here. And the same thing happens with when your name's out there and you're doing a certain type of work at a high level. Just people that you know around the industry are going to say, "Oh, I think Ben Ritter would be really good for this," and that's literally how it works. But it took 10 years. So that's the thing. You know, I didn't start out just walking out with a camera saying, "Oh, I'm cool. I'm going to get this work." I busted my butt, and you make your own luck. I don't love that expression, but it's true. So here's more of, the kinds of things that word of mouth. And given this isn't like the ad campaign for Levi's, but they have special projects they do. And this particular project, they hired, I think, like photographers all over the globe to shoot people they consider tastemakers. And there's my Levi's credit. And then you have to keep up with your own personal projects too. This magazine called Jacques had me shoot their whole current issue. And it's all shot on film, and there's no retouching. So it really brought me back to my roots as a photographer, just using old manual cameras and just really pushing my own artistic ability. Because you do lose, when you're shooting all the pretty faces on white backdrops, you sort of lose your identity as anything of an artist at all. The same thing the story was with the Sneeze project. This girl happens to be the art director and genius behind the idea of this project and brought it to me. She works at an ad agency, and now that ad agency calls me. So, it's another just person I knew before she was, and now she is. So if I'm in the top row, if you can find me. I look like an animal of some sort. And this project was really successful because it was very down to earth. It was very fun, and it included, there's 100 of these portraits. It was just brought people together like a community. And it got people talking, and that's always the idea. And then you use the internet, you use Instagram, you use Facebook, because I don't care what people have to say about it, it's free. And you can reach a lot of people. And when you reach people, you get opportunities. And when you're nice and you do a good job, you get another opportunity, and they grow. And it truly grows, and I'm of evidence of it, because when I started, I started with some thoughts about what I wanted to do. Some people ask what I bring out with me. Here's a typical small day with my kit. I'm sure only a few people in here are completely interested in this. If anyone's very interested later, I'll be happy to bring that back up on the screen. And here's some of me at work, behind the scenes. My assistants love taking pictures of me when I'm having to get on the ground to shoot like a shoe or something because I hate it so much. So I have a lot of those. It's, you know, the job is so fun when you're getting to do what you want to be doing with it. But as I've shown you, I don't wake up every day and have the best day. I go do what I have to do to make money, keep my clients, keep them happy, and keep myself happy enough, honestly. And then the opportunities come when you do your own personal things. You work with other people. You show the people that you're working with what you're doing with the other people, and the people that are hiring you are going to move around. They're going to go to different companies, different magazines. It spreads. It is viral, truly. Here's me this week, having the best week ever. Thank you, everyone. I can't believe how amazing this has been. I can't believe that everyone stayed in this room while I talked this whole time. I'm in love with all of you. If anyone has any questions, right now would be a great time to ask them. If you want to come back in and maybe start a dialogue, I'd be happy to. And you know, you can ask about any work in the room, any experiences I've had, anything you want to know about just working in a day-to-day kind of life. I'd be happy to talk. Thank you.
Yeah.